If you are like me, you spent a lot of time recently playing the game Marvel Rivals. It is a new hero shooter by Marvel and NetEase. It plays sort of like Overwatch, and it introduced a lot of characters, many of which people are familiar with. Your Wolverines, your Thors, your Iron Mans, your Captain Americas, your Hulks, your Black Widows, your Hawkeyes, your Storms, right? Like, these are characters that I would expect most people to be familiar with. And then they obviously introduced other characters that people are much less familiar with. Characters like Penny Parker, who you may have seen in a thing once or twice, and characters like Jeff the Landshark, who's barely in anything, and then Luna Snow, who's like in even less stuff, but again, is part of this game, and they've kind of elevated from this very obscure comic character to like a main part of this universe now, and she's going to show up in comics and stuff. So maybe this is part of a bigger push, or maybe they were just like, she fits into this game really well, we want someone that can freeze, we want a healer, so let's do Luna Snow. It could be any reason, but either way, you're always getting introduced to like random characters you've never heard of before in a game like this. But what I wanted to make a video about is one character specifically who is in this game, who is not necessarily that first thing. She's not a household name, but she's also not like a complete unknown. If you read Marvel comics or have seen the movies, you maybe have seen this character around and you go, oh yeah, I remember her. You see her in the game, like in the trailer, and you go, right, yeah, that's the one from that movie that I didn't see. But yeah, she's one of the X-Men or something. And this is a character who has a lot of fans. And I see a lot of people say, what's so special about her? Why is this character so popular? And I wanted to make a video, and this is not the complete history of this character. Those videos exist, you can go watch them. This is more just like from a fan of this character. If you were wondering, why do people like her so much? This is why. And obviously, based on the action figure and the title of the video and stuff, we're talking about Illyana Rasputin, aka Magik. And she is a member of the X-Men, the New Mutants. She's in the Midnight Suns very recently, and she's in Marvel Rivals. Now, two things real quick. Number one, Marvel Rivals has like lore that exists in the game. This is not me explaining that to you, because that is somewhat different for different characters, and like I think some of it gets revealed over time. I don't know all of the lore for Illyana. I imagine it's going to gel pretty closely to what we're getting here, mostly because like her powers in the game line up with what she can do in the comics. Number two, I'm not going to pretend that a big part of the allure of this character is not the fact that she is, you know, a 20-ish-year-old blonde girl with hot pants and a shirt with a big boob window in it. Like, that is definitely a part of it. And I think if you're seeing it from a distance, you can see Illyana and go, oh, I get why people like her. Yeah, it's like she's one of those. And while that is definitely a big part of it, there is more to her that I think makes her fun, that I think is interesting to talk about, and I want to make sure people know. And I'll say, first of all, I've not always been a humongous fan of this character. I did not like read the New Mutants books growing up or anything like that. I think I read some of the Uncanny books as they were coming out, the ones from the mid-2010s, or like early 2010s. That was the like Cyclops revolutionary era. Magik was a big part of that. I remember reading about her in the Phoenix 5. She was a big part of the Avengers X-Men event, and then she was played by Anya Taylor-Joy in the New Mutants movie, and she's one of the things that I think a lot of people came away from that movie going, listen, throw all this out, but maybe keep her, because that's good. This is a good actor with this character, and like she, you know, nailed a lot of the stuff about Illyana that's important. And then Illyana was also in the Marvel Midnight Suns game, which was great, and she was a character that was like the best. So I think that also got a lot of people on Illyana's team. But first of all, I'm going to give you the moment why I was like, oh, this character's awesome. And before this, like, I had liked this character. I read stories that she was in. I thought she was fun. But it wasn't until I saw this image that I was like, oh, okay. It's this. It was the cover of a comic. If you watch a lot of my videos that I used to on camera in front of my wall that had the comics on it, this was on it a lot. I was really glad I got this. It's by one of the artists who I will always, like, if I see one of their covers, I'll just pick it up because I think their covers are cool. It doesn't matter what the book is. It's an artist named Maria Wolf, and it is this cover. I think it was her first cover that she did for Marvel, but it's this cover of Illyana, just humongous sword on fire, diving into a big like mess of demons. I thought it was super cool. Love the color, and I just love that the action of this image, and like the, you know, you can kind of see it on her face. And like I have other covers for Illyana books. There's a new Magik book. This is a cover by David Nakayama, who I really like. So you got like this one. This is a cool cover, but like, you know, comic books, it's like this scantily clad woman. That's like a way to sell a comic book. I think what I thought was so cool about this, and what I continue to think is so cool about this image, is that like that's not what this is. She is mad, and like she's diving into this big, whatever this is, like wall of demons. I would assume, as you get to the bottom, you get to more demons. And I really like that. I thought it was very cool. But yeah, like Maria Wolf, one of my favorites. I mean, like, this is like the gallery cover for the comic they did recently. Ghost Rider, love this Ghost Rider. So like, I remember seeing this Magik comic online first, and then picking it up from my comic book store, and going like, that's a cool character, and like, there was something there. And before we get into all the other stuff I like about the character, I'll give you a really quick intro to this character, her history, what she's been through, what her powers are, although those do also inform what people like about her. But all you really need to know to understand her, she is Colossus, Peter Rasputin's sister, his younger sister. She went with him to live with the X-Men, mostly because she was in danger, because he was like a superhero now, or whatever the X-Men were at the time. So like, she did not have powers. She was kidnapped by a demon sorcerer named Belasco and taken to a dimension called Limbo. This is very important. That is what the pink, like all the demons were, was kind of her in Limbo. And like I said, it's kind of like hell. It's not hell, because that exists in Marvel Comics too, but like it might as well be. And this Illyana was like a child, like very young, and she was forced to survive in Limbo. I don't know exactly what the explanation is. I think it's like time dilation or something, but she came back after that adventure, little time having actually passed, but older, like a teenager now. And she had mutant abilities and some sort of magic power. So the mutant abilities, and if you look at this character, first of all, like, you see Illyana, you see what she could do in the game, or what she does in Midnight Suns or something, but like, even just you see this image, and you're like, what is this character's mutant power? She has like armor on, she's a big flaming sword. Those are two things that would seem like her mutant power, especially the armor. And I think this makes a lot of sense. Honestly, I thought this was part of it, because a lot of characters have multiple mutant powers, right? Emma Frost can read your mind and also turn her body into diamonds. Part of me just figured, oh, she's Colossus's sister. Her arm turns metal, or like she can generate like armor on her body the same way that he can turn his entire body into metal, but she can do other stuff. I think that sword is part of it, I guess. That is, in fact, not her mutant power at all. That is a consequence of her using the sword, which is also not her mutant power. Illyana's power involves her creating what she calls stepping discs, but like basically she can use Limbo to create kind of a portal from one place to another. But it is like with Nightcrawler, like an instantaneous teleportation, but technically you're going through the Limbo dimension. The sword is actually part of Illyana's soul, which is part of the Limbo thing. Demon was trying to take her soul away, forged the bloodstones, and I can't remember exactly how, but she was able to turn that piece of her soul into this sword, the Soul Sword. And it is an incredibly powerful sword. It's not like the most powerful sword, like it could cut through anything, but it is very, sharp and also magical. So it is where the armor comes from. When Illyana summons the Soul Sword, which is called the Eldritch Armor, just sort of shows up on her arm, usually the arm that's holding the sword. And if she stayed holding it forever, then her body would be covered in it, but it's usually something that she, takes out for a mission and then puts away. Those are basically her superpowers. Now, she has some knowledge of magic because she was the prisoner of a sorcerer, and also she's existed on this more mystical side of Marvel Comics, especially the X-Men part of Marvel Comics, because like there are very few, and this is part of what's so great about Illyana. She's on the X-Men, but the X-Men like do X-Men stuff, right? Scott Summers, he has maybe like a space side because his dad is from space, but it's not like he goes there for space adventures all that often. He usually does things the X-Men do. And then Beast usually does X-Men things. Wolverine kind of, he's got his own army stuff going on sometimes. Gambit sometimes does thief stuff, but none of them are as different, it feels like, as what Magik is doing, where she is just a member of the X-Men or the New Mutants or whatever. She will show up for a mission, fight Magneto, whatever, and also go to her hell dimension and do stuff there, or do some sort of magical thing. And there's no reason that other mutants can't also do magic, right? Like the mutant gene is a gene, you have to have it. But like in Marvel Comics, you can be a mutant and do magic. And Illyana is not like the same kind of magician as like Doctor Strange, but she does know stuff. And every so often she'll like pull something out, like, oh, right, that's what this is. That's what this spell is. I see what's going on here. She also has demons that she can sometimes kind of command. That's what happens in the game, because she does eventually become the ruler of Limbo. She can open a portal, pull a demon out, and throw it at you. When that's what she usually does, and I don't think currently in the comics she is in charge of Limbo. I believe she had to give it up to Madeline Pryor, but kind of the same way that Thor's on the Avengers, and he's like, I'm Thor doing Avengers stuff. Also, I gotta go do an Asgard thing, because I am king of Asgard. Magik sort of has that relationship with Limbo in the more supernatural side of Marvel Comics. But the other thing about Magik is she has a dark side, an evil version of herself called Darkchilde. And this is what her ultimate ability is in Marvel Rivals. And it's this more feral version of her. Sometimes it's more monstery. I don't know, like sometimes Darkchilde does look like it's like a goat person. But sometimes it is just like a more evil looking kind of version of Illyana. Demonic, I guess is the way you would describe it. And sometimes if you leave her alone in Limbo for too long, she'll just go full Darkchilde. And this has to do with the fact that her soul was put into the Soulsword. So like she has a part of her soul that's missing. And that's this weird thing that some characters in the X-Men, like Pixie, will have a piece of her soul missing. Strong Guy is brought back to life without his soul, and like souls are a thing that you can have. So part of it comes from the fact that like because she's spending a lot of time in this realm, she can get corrupted and become this evil version of herself. So that's already interesting. All right, let's talk about why people like this character. First of all, she's an X-Man who is not an X-Man, right? She was not recruited to be an X-Man. She was a side character that kind of graduated up to being an X-Man. And I think that's interesting because a lot of the time when you bring a new character into a book like this, it can feel forced. It doesn't matter who they are. If it's like just some random character who's got a cool power, maybe that'll be enough. Maybe you'll see like Quentin Quire will show up in an next book and you'll go, oh, they want him to be like the next big thing. And then he becomes the next big thing and that's great. But also in the case of other characters, like, I don't know, say Surge, not to say that Surge is a bad character because they're not, but like with the Academy X kids, there was a lot of like, oh, these are the next generation of X-Men, but none of them, well, some of them, but very few of them really connected, especially at the time. So they sort of fell out of the spotlight. But with Illyana, you had a character who we as an audience already had a strong connection to through Colossus. And then she started spending time with Kitty, another character who we really liked, like a very popular X-Men character. So I think that dynamic immediately made her interesting. I'd say the main thing about Illyana's story that it is important to take away from her, though, is like, obviously, very cool sword, you know, teleporting, fighting demons and stuff, but also she was kidnapped as a child, and like she's a victim a lot of the time in these stories. She's one of those characters that you can tell is always thinking about that, right? There's certain times when there will be something that team is doing and they'll be like trying to save like a kid, and Illyana will take that very personally. But she's got this really tragic past. I think because of that, Illyana a lot of times acts really tough. And it's not necessarily a facade. It's more of, I would say, just like a consequence of her being, you know, spending so much time in Limbo. And like her stories in Limbo are insane. I would say I'm not going to reading recommend. Well, you know what? Let's do a couple reading recommendations. I think it's called Storm and Illyana from the Files of Magik. I think that's what it's called now. There's a short miniseries where Illyana gets taken to Limbo and she runs into another team of X-Men who they all got stuck there, but it's not her X-Men, and it's interesting. That just shows like this is all the stuff this girl had to go through at a very young age. It's hard not to want to just recommend New Mutants as a reading recommendation. The Simonson, you know, Chris Claremont, like that New Mutants era is iconic. She is not in the original team, but she joins fairly, so somewhere around 20 issues in or something like that, and she's a huge part of that team. Very cool. I do think, you know, looking at what the New Mutants were at the time, this was a team of, you know, a pretty boy, a hayseed, right? Like very familiar archetypes that you would see in like a Breakfast Club, right? Like a repressed Catholic, you know, wolf girl. And then you have Illyana thrown in there. I think what sometimes is very fun about her is she does not feel like the rest of these characters. And I think it took me a while to realize this. She is fun on the X-Men team she has been on, for the same reasons that like Wolverine is fun on the X-Men teams he's been on. Really tragic past, a lot of history, a lot of stuff that like we don't necessarily know, but you know, we've heard about, and a lot of characters will say like, you know what happened to them back in the day, it was pretty crazy. But then also because of that, they've got a lot of emotions, very angry, and love to just jump headfirst into a big fight. And I think that makes them a very fun character. It's a character who, like if you have the X-Men or the New Mutants, a team Illyana is on, and they're all somewhere. Like they're just at a bar or in space or something. I think if someone starts causing trouble with that group, it's going to be interesting. But it's going to be especially interesting because Illyana's ready to throw down at any moment. He's very protective of the people that she cares about, the people that she is close to, which is the New Mutants and the X-Men. And like, she is a very violent character who solves a lot of her problems that way. And just a fun character to read, and a fun character in books, and a fun character to pair other characters with. Characters who maybe don't have a lot of people on their level, but Illyana is different, right? I think one character that people really like her paired with, not in like a romantic way, but just as a friend, is Cyclops. I didn't notice this. I mean, I noticed this because obviously they're in that Uncanny X-Men book, which I would say is another, like, you got to read that book, which was part of Scott's like team of X-Men Liberators. Besides being the teleporter on that team, which having a teleporter on a team, always huge. She was also like the muscle for that team, which is cool. But like, she is good on a team with someone like Cyclops, because Cyclops is all business, but she'll say like, but let's go kill those guys. And Cyclops will be like, hold on, Illyana. Obviously we want to, but we can't. And she'll go, but we could kill him a little bit though, right? And it's not the same as what Wolverine and Scott have, where Wolverine is constantly, not constantly, but sometimes challenging Scott's leadership, where Scott feels like he has to, project strength because Wolverine and his girl are maybe, flirting or something. Magik and Scott have this very good like chemistry that two coworkers who work really well together have. And I think that made her a really fun character on this team at this time. There really was just Scott, Emma Frost, who was with Scott at the time. So they had that dynamic, which was fun. Magneto, obviously one of the best characters in the history of comics. And then Illyana was really like right up there in terms of high-ranking members of this team. So she sort of felt important as part of that group and used that opportunity to kind of prove herself. Okay, so other stuff that's fun about Illyana. She has teleportation. Like I said, great power. Portals are fun. Also the sword. Sword plus portals means, like that image, you're getting a lot of this character is teleporting up to the face of the giant monster and just gonna cut her way down, right? You have a very kinetic character in Magik, and it helps that the sword, the soul sword, is not always drawn the same. Sometimes it's just like a little sword, and especially in the early days, like it just looks like a sword. As time went on, and especially during this, I think the Bendis run, whatever this is, the sword got way bigger and turned into a big giant anime sword. And I think that was great because it makes the idea that this small, not tiny, but like small compared to like, Cyclops or Colossus or whatever, blonde girl was holding a sword that was bigger than her and was using it to cut Sentinels in half. Like, that is a cool image. I also think Magik as a character, she does feel very, and this is a word I use a lot to describe a lot of things, but somewhat Schwarzeneggerian. She will have a line, not necessarily like a pun, but I guess she feels like a character who understands how cool all the stuff she's doing is. What else is fun about Magik? I mean, she does fit into a lot of things, right? So she's Russian, first of all, one of two Russian characters. And I think as Marvel Comics have kind of lost sight of Colossus, it has gotten a better handle on what is cool about Magik. So I think, this is just me, especially over the Krakoan era, we've seen less Colossus and we've seen more Magik. And I think it is because, like, you can only have one Russian character in these books, but she is the more fun member of that family for me and for like readers. I also think it's really interesting that Magik has grown up. There are very few comic characters that like age. It doesn't usually happen, right? Like, how old is Cyclops? When this started, he was younger. Then pretty much my whole life, he has been late 20s, early 30s. And there's this sliding comics time scale where you never know exactly how old someone is. And again, I will say, because some people will ask me this, like, how old is Magik? Because they'll see her dressed like she is in her recent comic to go like, isn't that character like a teenager? And it's like, she has not been a teenager for a while. I would say definitely in that Uncanny X-Men run with Revolutionary Cyclops, she's gotta be like in her early 20s. She just turned 25 in this new Magik comic, so we know that how old she is now. But it's hard with characters like this to tell what age they're supposed to be, because they graduated from school, and then other people are in school, and then other people have graduated between them. but they're all the same age, kind of. And like, it's like, you're older than her and you're older than him, but you should be 5 years older than him. In reality, you're 1 year older than him. It's comics, it's complicated. But I do think it's interesting that we have seen Illyana go from being a young child to an adult. Like, that is unusual in comic. And I think part of maybe why people gravitate towards Illyana is because they're able to grow up alongside this character, right? If you got into comics as a teenager in the 2010s and now you are 25 or something, you are the same age that she is, and you kind of saw that time pass in a similar way. I don't know if that's a huge reason, but I do think that's something that's unique about Magik. And I've also used this team before, like the Midnight Suns. I think if they make a Midnight Suns thing, because she was in the game and she was in one of the more recent comics, I think she's a dead ringer to put on that team. Because again, big cool sword and mutant. Like, you want mutants on teams that mutants are not usually on. It adds another dimension to whatever conflict they're involved in, because they usually have some sort of beef with the members of the Avengers who didn't help that last time they got genocided or whatever. And it just gives more exposure to these mutant characters. So then people read the Midnight Suns book, oh, she's cool, and then go back and read more of her stuff. I do think something very similar to this moment we're having now with Magik happened during the Midnight Suns game. The problem was that game was not as big of a hit as Rivals is, even though that game is great. One thing that's also fun about Magik is she likes to make people feel uncomfortable. So she will kind of kneel at certain people, not for fun, not the same way that like Moonstone does it to like break them, but more just because like that is how she gets close to people. And I think everybody knows a person like that. Not necessarily half your best friend, but someone who you're like, that is their weird way of showing affection and letting you into their circle. I think a lot of the X-Men are always trying to be the most heroic member of the X-Men, right? Like, especially if you look at the New Mutants. Danny Mirage and Sam Cannonball, those are like the two co-leads of the team. They're both trying to be Cyclops or like Captain America or whatever. Like, they want to be the best leader this team can ever have. Wolfsbane, interesting for her own reasons, where she's like very repressed. You have Berto, who's the pretty boy, who like isn't a bad boy necessarily, but just doesn't see himself as that kind of leader. Although Berto will be very much a leader of Marvel stuff in the future. But then you've got Illyana, who's not quite the bad boy of this team or bad girl, but she also just like doesn't give a shit in a way like a lot of the rest of these characters do. She's not trying to impress anybody. She's not trying to like be an Avenger someday or even be an X-Men. She is just out here trying to do whatever it is she wants to do. Like, she's here to kill Sentinels and, you know, fight Namor or whatever, and then that's what she's gonna do. But I guess that is another thing that's fun about her, because she has that kind of punk rock vibe. She doesn't always work well with authority, and like Wolverine, that's always a fun clash. Like I said, she gets along really well with Scott, but she will clash with members of the New Mutants when they don't want to do what she wants them to do. I guess one of the other things that's cool about Magik is you can throw Magik into a situation and you don't know what power or expertise she's going to use to get out of that situation. So like, for instance, if Cannonball, another member of the New Mutants, has to fight a Sentinel or whatever, or has to fight a big giant monster from space, he's going to try to punch it really hard using his, you know, invincibility field and do a big cannonball attack at it. With Illyana, it's like, is she going to try to teleport to it? Is she going to try to cut its head off? Does she know some other magic thing about it that she can use to like send it to the different dimension? She has a lot of plays, a lot of flexibility that a lot of other X-Men just don't have. And I do think one of the other things that's good about Magik is if you watch the New Mutants movie, like Anya Taylor-Joy was good. That was a good version of Magik. I think there's a couple of characters that they should bring to the MCU from the Fox movies. There's only a few. Kelsey Grammer Beast is good. I think that's good. Hugh Jackman Wolverine seems like he's coming anyway, you know, like Deadpool and all his friends. And then I think Laura Kinney, the X-23, Daphne Keane, absolutely bring her over. And then Magik. I think Illyana, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, is a really good pairing. Partially also because like that character had attitude. She was a little bit too unlikable, and people didn't like how she was making fun of Danny, calling her like Pocahontas and stuff like that. And I get that. I do think that could have been handled maybe a little bit better. But yeah, Anya Taylor-Joy as Illyana is the other thing that needs to come over to the MCU. She's still the right age, and like, I think a 30-year-old Illyana works in a version of this story where the New Mutants already happened. And like the Academy X team is like the main Young X-Men team. And there's this team of like graduates who aren't necessarily the X-Men, but they have some sort of history. And that's what the New Mutants are. I think that works. I just think she had like the vibe down. She had the attitude. Attitude is a big thing with Illyana. You know what? That's a good example of like in the New Mutants movie, Reign says, "You can't fight that thing, it's magic." And Illyana pauses, looks back at the camera and says, "So am I," before she jumps out to fight the demon bear. That's the kind of thing Illyana would do because Illyana knows that moment is cool. There's other reasons Illyana's a great character. In other books that people love Illyana from, I do think that the, original Storm Illyana series, the current Magic story that's going on, Uncanny X-Men, and then obviously both New Mutants runs, the original New Mutants run, but then also the one by Zeb Wells. Both of those are very good ways to get introduced to this character. The New Mutants run that came on Krakoa was also great. I also loved that art by Rod Rice. He's like one of my favorite comic artists, and I need to one of these days get some sort of Illyana art from him because he does such cool like mixed medium art, and the Illyanas that he's done are awesome, especially because you can lean into the demon aesthetic and get something very cool. I'll put some on the picture. Here's one that is on screen. Cool, like it. But yeah, so that's a video. Isn't that interesting? That's Illyana, really like a character that I don't think she's that complicated. Like she's complicated compared to a character like Colossus, who's like, what's his deal? Metal, big giant guy, nice, likes to paint. The other thing about Illyana that's weird, no real relationships. She is somewhat provocative sometimes, in a way where she'll like find someone who is like a little nervous around her, and she'll maybe try to flirt with them just to, keep them on their toes. But like she has not had, I don't think, a major relationship in the comics. There's plenty of people like myself who think that she would be a great pairing for Kitty, even though it's weird that they grew up together, and also that Kitty was about to get married to Illyana's brother. But yeah, it's the X-Men. You do weird stuff like that. I do think they're just a good pairing, and I do think their energies bring like something fun out of each other. And then there's like guys that Illyana's been interested in as well. And there's also the possibility that she is asexual or aromantic or whatever. Like it's kind of fun that we don't know, and that's not something that you think about with Illyana outside of maybe the Shadowcat thing. You don't go like, ooh, who's she with? Or like, I don't know. She's all business, and that is fun. But anyway, so that's the video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll probably make more of these. I'll probably figure out a structure, make them better. But I hope you enjoyed this one about just why Magik is a favorite character of mine and a lot of X-Men fans. If you have your own reasons or other recommendations for reading, let me know. Other characters you're like, why do people like this guy? What's his deal? I'd be happy to do a video about them. And obviously, what I'd be most happy with is if you checked out this video's sponsor, Nebula. If you've never heard of it before, Nebula is a subscription streaming service that me and a bunch of other YouTubers, a lot of people you're probably already watching, created because we wanted to have more control over our videos. We didn't want to have to cater to the algorithm, and we wanted to offer a better experience to you guys so you can watch all of my videos. They're all early. Some of them are like a full month early, some of them are like a day early, but every video goes up first on Nebula, and that is Nando V Movies, and that is the Nando Cut, both of my channels, and they're completely ad-free, so there's no ads in the middle, and there's no sponsor read at the end. And in 2025, we have so much cool stuff that we are working on. One thing that I am very excited about is a show called Abolish Everything. This is a live show that happens in the city where people come in and bring something that they hate, and they give a short presentation on why it should be abolished. Then a panel of experts goes in and questions them. And I'm excited for Abolish Everything because like Nebula, we have a reputation for being very smart. We have a lot of very, very educated people who do research and make documentaries, but we also have a lot of really funny people, and I am excited to see that side of Nebula growing. And I always say, a year of Nebula is a steal, $5 a month or $60 a year. But if you use the code TheNandoCut at checkout, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. It's a great deal. Check it out. Go to go.nebula.tv/TheNandoCut. Use the code TheNandoCut at checkout. I guarantee you'll find something cool you're going to like.